Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Now, usually on this show, we're all about celebrating the big wins. You know, the films, the science, the culture that really pushes things forward.
But today, we're doing the exact opposite, a complete 180.
We are diving headfirst into a year that, based on the mountain of source material we've collected, stands as this just profound testament to creative and, frankly, financial mismanagement.
It's true. One of our main sources described 2025, pretty colorfully, I might add, as an abomination of cinema.
That's a strong statement.
It is, but the commentary we've compiled paints an astonishingly bleak. We're looking at what these critics are calling possibly Hollywood's most abysmal year yet.
Wow.
Yeah, the sheer consistency of the failure, both critical and, in a lot of cases, financial, it cuts across every single genre. It feels almost unprecedented, and it suggests, some really fundamental issues in how this content made.
Right, and that's our mission here. This deep dive isn't just about listing off bad movies.
No, not at all.
We want to really analyze the core mechanisms of failure that are laid out in these very specific, very detailed reviews. We've got an analysis of what the sources are calling the top 5 worst movies of 2025.
Plus a bonus film that completely dominated the awards circuit for all the wrong reasons.
And what our main source is very confidently calling the worst television show of all time.
It's quite a list.
So we really need to get to the bottom of why these projects, we're talking about everything from mega budget adaptations to, auteur horror films and charged dramas, why they failed so spectacularly, at least according to this mountain of critique.
And our scope is really defined by these intense critiques. We're looking at the total collapse of major studio IP, like the live-action Snow White and the reboot Tron.
We'll get into the thematic mess of the Jordan Peele production him.
The franchise betrayal of Predator, Badlands, the just sheer cynicism of War of the World.
And we also have The Weeknd, what's being called a vanity project, Hurry Up Tomorrow.
And that hugely controversial bonus film, Amelia Perez.
Okay, so before we wade into this swamp of creative misjudgment, our sources did offer one tiny little ray of sunshine.
A very small one.
They mentioned a couple of exceptions, the bangers, as they put it, that just didn't get reviewed in this particular roundup. So a quick shout out to Weapons and Frankenstein.
Which were apparently excellent. They just managed to escape this timeline of trash.
Right.
And we have to emphasize why we're including that bonus film, Amelia Perez. It actually debuted late in 2024.
But it became a massive cultural flashpoint during the 2025 awards season.
And a massive one. It pulled in a staggering 13 Academy Award nominations. And yet the source material we have is it's uncompromising. It labels the film the thickest piece of trash ever nominated for an Academy Award.
That's incredible.
So that context is absolutely vital. We're looking at films that critics and audiences hated and one film that split the entire industry down the middle. It really proves that, high artistic praise doesn't shield a film from intense scorn.
Okay, let's unpack this collective failure. And we have to start where the money is biggest and the expectations were, the highest.
Major studio reboots and adaptations.
Exactly. We had to begin with Disney and the film that was just hammered by critics, the live-action Snow White.
The source material reserves this special level of pure, unadulterated contempt for this.
I noticed that.
The main critique is that this wasn't really an adaptation. It was a reimagining that basically stripped the original classic of its higher purpose.
And the source called it a complete and utter disgrace to the screen.
Yep. And presented it as the perfect example of why family audiences are just getting tired of going to the movies.
And the thing is, the problem, as the source details, started months, if not years, before the film ever even premiered.
Oh, absolutely. The sources meticulously tracked what they called the 7 controversies.
The 7 controversies.
These were just these public relations nightmares that kept shifting the narrative. It went from excitement to this sort of defensive skepticism.
And right at the heart of that were the comments from the star, Rachel Zegler.
Exactly. She publicly called the original 1937 film dated. She specifically labeled the prince a stalker.
A stalk.
And she made it really clear that her version was a deliberate modern revision. The goal, she said, was to make Snow White the leader she was always meant to be.
Pushing what the critique calls a really heavy-handed girl boss narrative.
That's the term they used.
I have to stop there and ask, for a story that's built on these classic fairy tale archetypes, if you remove the prince as a romantic goal, or even just, part of the happy ending, how does that affect the core structure of the story?
Well, the source argues it fatally compromises the original narrative end.
How so?
By trying to make Snow White this modern, flawless leader, the film basically eliminates the need for her to have a journey at all.
Oh.
In the original, her innocence and the queen's vanity, that's the central conflict. Here, she's depicted as a girl without flaws who's already perfect. She just needs to realize it and, claim her throne.
So there's no transformation, no internal arc.
None, which, according to the analysis, just fundamentally removes all the dramatic...
But the story changes weren't the only public train wreck. I think the single most jarring failure they cited was replacing the Seven Dwarfs.
That's right. So after the actor Peter Dinklage publicly critiqued the original characters as being, stereotypical, Disney went in a radically different direction.
Radically is one word for it.
They replaced the Seven Dwarfs completely with magical, and the source material is just scathing about how it was. It says these creatures were rendered as full-on CGI monstrosities.
The descriptions are just brutal. Pure nightmare fuel. Uncanny Valley horror.
And they just show up a third of the way into the movie.
The source also argues that it was this really offensive and, frankly, transparent attempt to avoid hiring actors who are little people.
Right. Wrapping the decision in this veneer of progressive casting, while at the same time creating creatures that just look aggressive bad.
It's a lose-lose, creatively and, you could argue, ethically.
And the critique just keeps going into the script itself. All the classic songs were reportedly just gone.
Replaced by what the source dismissively called new bullshit.
And like you said, the prince was completely rewritten. He's no longer the source of true love's kiss.
No, now he's a thieving vagabond.
A generally untrustworthy piece of, a very unlikable character who serves no real narrative purpose.
Even the name origin was changed. Snow White is because she was born in a winter storm, not because of her skin white as snow.
It's just change for the sake of change.
And if the script wasn't enough, the acting and casting got just as much fire.
Both Rachel Zegler and Gal Gadot, who played the Queen, were called out for absolutely terrible and cringe line delivery.
And this is where the basic premise of the story just implodes, right?
This is the core logical failure. The Queen's motivation is jealousy over Snow White's beauty. That's the whole story.
But you cast Gal Gadot, who is, world-renowned for her beauty.
To be jealous of Zegler. The source says the film immediately doesn't suspend your You're constantly questioning the premise. You're thinking, why would she feel threatened?
So the film has to try and fix it.
It tried. The source says the narrator has to repeatedly state how beautiful Gadot is, which then shifts the entire conflict away from beauty to Snow White being a better person.
Which isn't the story of Snow White.
Not at all. It's a complete thematic rewrite that undermines the entire foundation.
So what about the reception? I mean, this was a $300 million movie. What did the numbers say?
It was a disaster. The opening box office was reportedly so low, it immediately drew comparisons to The Marvels.
Which was, at the time, the lowest grossing MCU movie ever.
But the number that gets cited the most is the B+ cinema score.
Okay, for anyone listening who might not follow industry track, can you explain why a B+ for a Disney movie is basically a catastrophe? I mean, a B+ sounds like a good grade.
It's absolutely critical context.
Yeah.
Cinema score polls only the most engaged audience members.
The people who rush out on opening night.
Exactly. This is traditionally the film's most forgiving, most enthusiastic demographic. For a Disney live-action remake, which is targeting a huge family-friendly market, anything less than an A or an A is considered a massive failure.
So a B+ is?
The source argues it's the lowest for any Disney live-action remake, and when you grade it on that curve, it's functionally the same as a C- from the general public.
Wow. It just signaled immediate panic-level disappointment.
And near certain box office failure against that mess.
That's a fascinating breakdown of how these creative mandate and attempts at radical rewriting can just completely destroy a commercial product.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's move from a fantasy reimagining to a sci-fi sequel failure. Tron, Ares, another huge IP that the source says did a horrible disservice to the Tron legacy.
The main critique here is really simple. It's Tronless.
Tronless.
The film reportedly sidelines or just wipes the original characters off the board. Sam Flynn is MIA from the leadership role he earned in Legacy.
And the whole premise shifts away from the grid.
Which is the entire point of Tron. Instead, we get dragged into this really dull story that's all about corporation versus corporation. The source just dismisses it as pure corporate slop.
So total protagonist replacement. Sam Flynn is out, and in comes a boss bitch character named Eve.
Right. And the conflict is a battle for artificial intelligence supremacy between these two just cartoonishly defined corporations.
Let me guess. Good versus evil.
Oh, offensively so. You have Encom, the nice company. They wear light colors. They're 3D printing AI into the real world to make virtual plants.
Virtual plants.
And then you have Dillinger's company, the evil company. They wear red, and they want to build badass fighting machines for the military.
The setup is just criticized for being aggressively simplistic, offensively on the nose.
Reducing these really complex sci-fi themes to board shays.
And Jared Leto is playing Ares, who replaces Tron as the Master Control.
He's an indestructible super soldier, but he has this one crippling limitation.
Right, he's limited to 29 minutes in the real world before he just disintegrates. He needs a permanence code.
And that 29-minute timer is singled out as the most idiotic piece of the entire film.
Why is that?
The sources point out that the protagonists, who supposedly have access to all this top-tier mobile, they never once think to just move outside the villain's 29.
So they just stay there waiting for him to attack again.
It ensures the villains can just keep attacking them at these regular, predictable intervals. The critique is that this plot device forces the protagonist to be complete fucking morons just to keep the action going.
And if the timer itself is dumb, the consistency is even worse, right?
Precisely. The pacing is so broken that the timer is just conveniently forgotten whenever the plot needs a long action sequence or a big chunk of action.
It's just a cheap tension device that they couldn't even commit to.
Exact.
The writing itself is cited as being absolutely atrocious, relying on that blunt tell, don't show exposition. Give me the prime example.
The moment that gets cited the most is when Ares, the digital character, needs to understand the new protagonist, Eve.
Okay.
So instead of watching her actions or having a meaningful conversation, Ares literally reads her private messages.
Right.
A text exchange that details her entire backstory, her whole thing about not living up to her dead sister's standards, and he just delivers it verbatim to the audience.
That's character development via data dump.
It's just bureaucratic. There's no emotion to it.
It sounds totally inorganic.
Yeah.
And that lack of organic characterization extends to Ares, too. He just flips allegiances on a dime.
On a dime is right. Within 5 minutes of screen time, he flips his loyalty. He goes from being this obedient digital soldier creating chaos to suddenly being this emotional hero, ready to face deletion to save Eve.
A character he just met.
The source argues this artificial relationship jump happens purely to manufacture a quick emotional payoff at the end. It serves the plot, not the character. It was cited as the worst case of arbitrary character motivation in the whole.
And the cherry on top, Jeff Bridges reportedly phoned it in.
And the visuals spent way too much time in the boring-ass real world instead of the spectacular grid that made the franchise famous.
So when it finally gets back to the grid,
it's fleeting, it's dark, and it's often overshadowed by the boring reality where the corporate conflict is happening. The conclusion is that Tron, Ares wasn't a film about the wonder of a digital world. It was just a tedious fight for market share.
Okay, so if high-budget franchises are failing because of studio mandates and broken rules, what happens when independent auteurs try to tackle complex issues?
That is great.
And it brings us right into the world of thematic failures, especially in horror, where these ambitious concepts were apparently just sabotaged by terrible execution. We have to start with the Jordan Peele production, him.
This film got an astonishing amount of hatred from the source.
It was described as a cinematic septic tank.
And an utter failure. The main critique is that it tries to be a horror think, but it's fundamentally brain dead. It tries to tackle greatness, sacrifice, race, concussions.
Everything at once.
Throws everything at the wall, and nothing sticks. There's no coherence, no resolution.
And the sources even noted as a kind of side piece of evidence that the production company, Universal, was apparently flagging clips from the most critical video reviews with copyright.
Right, which is a pretty strong sign that they knew they had a critical disaster, couldn't handle the negative.
That's the level of failure we're talking about.
The film is accused of being pseudo-arts, of believing that just being incoherent. Let's break down the central bizarre plots.
Okay. The protagonist is QB Cade. He's a promising black athlete training for the draft. He meets a character named White, who's the retired G8 championship.
Then Cade gets subjected to this series of escalating, violent, and often oddly sexual trials.
Including a high-tech football machine that shoots footballs into a receiver's face.
By White crew. That bizarre atmosphere is the initial critique, but the whole plot just unravels completely at
the voice.
White reveals that his JOT status wasn't earned through skill or hard work. It was all from blood and occult rich passed down from white quarterback to white quarterback.
And this revelation, which is supposed to be this profound social commentary.
It results in Cade killing White and the team owners in a sequence that the source labels dumber than a sack of...
Let's focus on that thematic misfire, because that seems to be the real center of the controversy here. The White character is so clearly a stand-in for Tom Brady.
8 championships, the longevity.
Yeah.
The source argues the entire movie is an attempt to critique Brady's success by claiming it was unearned and based on this, dark privilege.
And that leads right to the critique of the forced race.
It's so heavy-handed it feels like a billboard sign says race. The film tries to critique a white quarterback's privilege through the eyes of a fictional black cube.
And the source points to a specific line where White tells Cade he had to be great just to be considered good.
Which is highlighted as being completely contradictory to the reality of black success in the NFL, where, many of the league's top stars, especially at quarterback, are black. Film is trying to make a commentary that is already contradicted by reality.
So it fails to form a coherent thought on the subject.
Not at all. It's like the film started with a message and just bent reality to fit it, even when it didn't make it.
And the source also slams how it handles the theme of sacrifice.
Yes. They argue the film just fundamentally misunderstands what sacrifice means in a dramatic. It confuses it with simple exploit.
Meaning?
Cade and the other athletes, they aren't making conscious emotional choices to give up something meaningful. Instead, you just have these painful, horrific things being forced on them through occult rituals and manipulation by shadowy...
So it mistakes prolonged pain and gross-out horror for genuine emotional depth.
And purpose. The theme just collapses into a series of
And beyond the script, the production quality itself is heavily criticized. The source describes the editing as if the footage was tossed in a blender and someone hit puree.
It's cinematic whiplash. Scenes just crash into each other without proper transition or context, which makes an already incoherent plot feel totally fragmented.
And the lead actor, Tyreek Withers, is reportedly a major liability.
The source claims he has the screen presence of a tattered cardboard box, just non-existent energy shuffling through the movie like he's on sedatives.
And a roulette wheel of mismatched expressions that rarely fit the situation.
It's a rough critique, but there was one bright spot.
Right, Marlon Wayans.
He's the lone bright spot in the entire film. Even though his character is really thinly sketched, just a generic friend, Wayans reportedly brings this grounded intensity and comedic timing that almost tricks you into thinking the script gave him something to work with.
But ultimately, his talent is just wasted.
Completely wasted on the garbage material all around.
Okay, moving from confusing thematic horror to the neutering of a classic monster, Predator, Badlands. The big complaint here is that this film committed the cardinal sin of demystification.
Turning an R-rated, terrifying, and mysterious franchise into kiddie murder.
This is what's being called the Disneyfication of the monster.
Purely to appeal to a broader PG-13 audience and, most cynically, just to generate merchandise revenue. The source material is visibly disgusted by this.
They say it's gotten so far from the core concept of the Predator, this unseen, inhuman, unstoppable hunter, that it might as well just be called something different entirely.
And the result is a found family movie where all the dread is just replaced by forced pathos.
Let's talk about the specific character changes that just destroyed the monster's mystique.
The protagonist Predator is named Deck. He is constantly speaking, yelling things like, "I am Yocha!" And he's given this complete, emotionally complex backstory. He's got daddy issues with his father. He's grieving his dead brother.
He's positioned as an empathetic, nice predator,
which completely undermines the entire concept of the Yacha as this alien species driven by a pure, uncompromising code of the hunt, not, emotional melody.
And it becomes a buddy movie with an annoying robot companion, Thea, and worst of all, a Baby Yoda knockoff sidekick.
That exists purely to sell merchandise. The source names the sidekick Baby Ballast. It's the offspring of the giant monster the Predator is hunting, and notes it's just this clear, cynical attempt to cash in on the adorable side.
So the tone completely shifts, and the writing just embraces full absurdity.
With plot points that just beggar belief.
Give us the most ridiculous examples from the sources.
Okay, so the absurdity ranges from the Predator, Deck, creating tools, using the dangerous creatures on the planet, like specifically taming an acid-spitting eel and turning it plasma.
Okay.
To a scene with the annoying robot Thea. At one point, Thea's disembodied pair of legs is set free by the Predator, and those legs just proceed to kick the shit out of synth guards in this long, unfunny comedy.
Wait, a pair of disembodied legs just starts fighting people? That sounds like the film has completely abandoned its horror roots.
And embraced a late-stage MCU humor mentality. Absolutely. The film is heavily criticized for suffering from that forced, unfunny, constantly winking at the audience, and it makes the Predator seem weak and ridiculous.
And the main monster they're hunting, the supposedly undefeatable Cal,
is defeated instantly by a single convenient ice ball thing thrown by the sister bot, Tessa. It's a major plot contrivance that removes any sense of threat.
The sources drew a direct contrast to Prey, the earlier film in the franchise, didn't they?
They did. The source says that Prey, which successfully returned the franchise to its stripped-down, suspenseful roots, looks like a fucking masterpiece compared to the obnoxious, sloppy mishmash of Badlands.
So the core issue is humanizing the Predator.
Serving a perceived narcissistic need to see oneself in the main character by destroying the essential dread of the unknown hunter.
We have one final cinematic stinker before we move on. Hurry up tomorrow. This is the film from the weekend, Abel Tesfaye, and it is universally dismissed as pretentious slop.
It's basically categorized as this elaborate act of artistic self-indulgence. The source calls it an hour-and-a-half excuse to glaze his own work genius.
It says he clearly believed he was making something like Pink Floyd's The Wall,
but ended up with nothing more than a complete farce.
and the central plot is just a masterpiece of narcissism.
It is. The Weeknd's character is heartbroken after his girlfriend leaves him for... He then meets a fan who ties him to a bed and threatens to burn him alive unless he confesses his own fucking genius as a songwriter.
That's the dramatic engine of the film. He's being forced to acknowledge his own greatness.
It's incredible. The critique is swift and brutal. It's filled with psychedelic moodiness and attempts at depth that never land. Tesfaye's acting is described as hilariously bad, wooden, and self-serious.
And the final judgment from the source.
Pretentious slop by a pretentious, untalented hack who has no business working in film.
Okay, now we transition to the two films that drew intense, polarized criticism, not just for technical incompetence, but for these perceived ideological missteps and production failure. Let's start with the highly decorated and deeply controversial one, Amelia Perez.
This is our bonus material, and its trajectory is what makes it so important. 13 Academy Award nominations, which suggests widespread industry.
But the source material we analyzed labels it an insult to film and regressive.
And we have to note, this controversy was so intense that Netflix was even accused of trying to copyright block negative video reviews of the film.
The fundamental problem, according to this critique, is the thematic conflict. It tries so hard to be progressive that it literally implodes under its own weight.
Becoming regressive in its depiction of Mexico, its characters, and its whole approach to identity.
Okay, detail the plot for us, because that seems to explain the source's extreme reaction.
The core premise is a male drug who wants to transition to become Amelia Perez. The lawyer, Rita, played by Zoe Saldana, is initially portrayed as having a moral compass, but she immediately agrees to help this acknowledged murdering sociopath.
And the sociopath then goes to extreme lengths to disappear.
Yeah. Amelia fakes his own death, abandoning his wife and children who genuinely... Then later he pulls this bizarre Mrs. Doubtfire routine to see them.
The source cites the scene where Amelia, in her new identity, kisses his children who think she's a stranger as creepy or weird and deeply manipulative.
And the character and morality critique is just scathing. The script reportedly desperately wants us to like these characters, constantly using dialogue and music to tell you how to feel.
But fundamentally, not one character is likable.
Or believable. Rita, the lawyer, is cited as morally bankrupt for choosing to defend a psychopathic killer, which directly contradicts the script's insistence that she's a good person.
And this leads to the film's most egregious failure, according to the source. Its argument that Amelia's identity change is a moral imperative,
which allows the character a total free pass to ruin the lives of others, fabricate enormous lies, and abandon all familial responsibility, all of which the film praises as brave.
So the source argues that the film is saying identity trumps all things, parental responsibility, truth.
That's the core of the critique, that it's a morally backward way of thinking, designed to service a very specific political...
And the film features scenes that were cited as shockingly graphic and offensive, seemingly designed just for provocation.
Absolutely. The surgery scene is noted for being incredibly graphic, prolonged, and unnecessary, showing the full man-to-woman from penis to vagina transition in agonizing detail.
And the musical elements were found distracting and atrocious.
Such as the bizarre scene where Zoe Saldana's character rips out a girl's hair and rubs it on her crotch in this, sassy little dance number. The critique claims these moments were put in purely to shock or distract from the flimsy story.
And the ending, after all this trauma and abandonment, equally criticized.
When Amelia's true identity is revealed to the family, the script just mandates instant forgiveness. Even the wife, who was completely manipulated and financially fleeced, instantly accepts the lie because, in the source's words, two wrongs make a right.
And it ends with Amelia, the horror of a human being, getting a celebratory parade.
Underscoring the film's fundamental moral bank, where villainy is excused by...
That is certainly one of the most polarizing films of the year. Now we turn to what might be the most cynical release, defined by production incompetence and staggering product placement. War of the Worlds.
An Amazon Prime production nightmare. The sources all agree. The production quality is just indefensible.
Atrocious acting. PlayStation 1 visual effects.
It looks like a sci-fi channel movie from 20 years ago, despite being made for one of the world's biggest streaming services. The source even adds an anecdote that the film was allegedly shot without a director present.
Just Ice Cube reacting to Green's.
Pretty much.
And he plays the protagonist, Will Radford, a domestic terror analyst who is, by all accounts, completely incompetent.
He spends 80% of his screen time, stalking his kid, yelling at his son, calling his daughter during school hours. This guy, who supposedly have access to NSA surveillance equipment, uses it to hack his daughter's refrigerator.
And he repeatedly hangs up on the head of DHS to call his kids.
He gets all his information about the global alien invasion from Fox News, not from high-level security.
His incompetence extends to the government's own tech.
Yes. The sophisticated AI software he uses can only determine threat levels as low, medium, or high. It's a parody of bureaucratic tech.
And the central conflict is driven by a super hacker, Disruptor,
who turns out to be Radford's own estranged son.
And the big reveal of why the aliens came in the first place is maybe the most astonishingly stupid moment, according to this.
The government knew. The big reveal is that the government knew collecting mass data on every citizen would directly cause an alien invasion, but they did it anyway.
And their reason?
The sole explanation given by an Agent Coulson knockoff is this dismissive line. If we can't track our babe, how can we protect?
So the government caused the end of the world for the flimsiest nanny state reason possible.
The source argues the movie fully with a shrug.
And the absurdity culminates in the climate. The aliens are defeated by a computer virus.
And when that initially fails, the hero team has to invent a new virus to rewrite the aliens' DNA, all in about.
But this is all overshadowed by the truly cynical climax involving a thumb drive.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. This is what the source calls the most blatant product placement.
Let's hear it.
The team is seconds away from saving the world, but they desperately need a thumb drive to deliver the virus. In a moment of high tension, the hero realizes he doesn't have.
So what does he do?
Does he scavenge one from a dead soldier? He has to place an official Amazon delivery via Amazon. The camera lingers as he typed address order.
Hold on, the world is being invaded, and he stops to check out on Amazon.
Yes, and the world is saved when the Amazon delivery driver, who is somehow still working, uses a Prime Air drone to deliver the thumb drive right.
That's unbelievable.
The source argues, with a lot of justification, that this entire movie was just an elaborate ad to promote Amazon drone delivery under the guise of an alien invasion. It's an unbelievable failure of narrative integrity.
The idea that the fate of the planet rested on Prime Air drone tracking.
Yeah.
It's a level of absurdity you have to see to believe.
Truly.
That brings us to television. And a show described with the most politically polarized language of the year. In the source's words, a feminazi's wet dream and possibly the worst television show of all time. All's fair.
The sources reserved their most extreme critiques for this show. It stars Kim Kardashian, Glenn Close, and Naomi Watts.
And it's positioned as a woman power fantasy 101.
But according to the source, it leans so hard into the worst feminist stereotype that it ends up being deemed out of touch, shallow, hollow, and just plain off and offensive to everyone.
The core premise is an all-female divorce law that only represents women,
who are often characterized in the script as gold-digging whores or perpetual victims of men. The central failure is the blatant misandry and the double standards that drive the entire plot.
Every man in the show is portrayed
either sexless wimps or sex-crazed morons. While every woman is empowered, even when they commit horrific or illegal acts, it creates a moral universe that's completely inverted, according to.
Give us some of the shocking examples the source has cited to back this up.
They are numerous. In one case, a client cheats and then robs her husband of $40 million after he gets upset about the cheating. She's immediately celebrated as a hero because emotions set them free. In another unbelievable scenario, the lawyers justify a client cheating when her husband misses an MRI because he has cancer. They call him a bastard and defend her actions, even though the husband had previously given her $40 million in jewelry.
And the lawyers themselves are actively engaging in illegal activities, hacking, blackmail,
even suggesting murder. Yet they're still portrayed as these heroic figures fighting for justice. It creates a complete lack of moral foundation. The source notes the double standard is staggering.
Let's focus on Kim Kardashian's character, Allura. The source highlights the irony of her playing a sharp lawyer when she's a reportedly terrible actress who failed the bar exam in real life.
Her character, Allura, is narcissistic, wooden, and material, but the most horrific thing she does relates to her. After her ex-husband requested a divorce, Allura illegally implants her in his frozen,
forging his signature,
simply because she wanted a child again. Well, the show later rationalizes this as her right and a brave, despite it being fraudulent and a clear violation of his autonomy.
And the actions of the other lawyers are just as appalling.
Indeed. Naomi Watts' character threatens to blackmail a security guard by accusing him of sexual assault just to get into a building. Another character, the diverse code cracker, threatens to slap the black out of her son for playing coy about getting into MIT.
And she constantly glorifies single motherhood,
raising her kids to believe fathers are completely useless. The source calls it a disgusting glorification of single motherhood based on hatred, not necessity.
and the show even goes as far as rationalizing violence.
It does. The source cites a storyline where a client throws sulfuric acid in her ex-husband's face. Kim's character only regrets that the client didn't tell them beforehand because it might
The moral reaction is focused on the legal risk, not the criminal violence.
not.
And here's the core structural contradiction the sources kept citing. The women are portrayed as super powerful and independent, but also completely incompetent and childlike when signing prenup.
Claiming they were too stupid to understand what they were doing. This is a critical point. This complete, convenient lack of autonomy is necessary for the plot to constantly paint them as victims of toxic masculinity, while also portraying them as omnipotent legal heroes.
They're only competent when destroying a man, and only incompetent when they need to be victims.
And precisely.
And the finale just accelerates the drama into a chaotic mess.
The final episodes escalate the conflict with Alora's ex, Chase, who is humiliated and, in the source's explicit terms, cucks himself repeatedly. Meanwhile, the new partner, Carr, who was initially the only somewhat likable character, joins the firm specifically to tear it apart from the inside.
And the season ends with Glenn Close's character being arrested for murder,
Possibly framed by Carr, leaving this final image of complete internal destruction.
We have covered a remarkable amount of cinematic and television failure in a single year. Looking across all these sources, the disastrous adaptations, the incoherent horror, the cynical product placement, the ideologically driven TV, what stands out as the ultimate common thread of failure in 2025.
I mean, what stands out most clearly, the thing connecting nearly every single critique, is the consistent prioritization of a predetermined theme or a political vibe or a cynical studio mandate over just basic writing.
So in almost every case, the execution failed on fundamental narrative element, pacing, believable character.
The essential principle of show, don't tell.
So whether the film was trying to critique Tom Brady's success like him, or celebrate a specific identity change like Amelia Perez, or promote this radical empowerment like All's Fair, the source material argues they all failed because they couldn't land the execution.
They couldn't build a narrative foundation that made audiences actually care. They were either too focused on being explicitly on the nose with their message, or they were just too distracted by studio drama and product placement to write.
They mistake incoherence for profundity.
And hollow political gestures for genuine emotional weight. The characters are rarely allowed to grow organically. They just act according to the political message the script is trying to deliver. They become these disposable vehicles for theme, not people you can invest in.
And that collective failure really teaches us, and you, the listener, the danger of prioritizing a message or a marketing angle over narrative integrity.
A key lesson for understanding the current cultural production landscape.
Which brings us back full circle to the wild contrast of the year. Our source notes that Amelia Perez received 13 Academy Award nominations, despite being called, by our sources, the thickest piece of trash ever.
A morally bankrupt movie, filled with terrible writing and offensive.
And this raises the final important question for you, the learner, to mull over as you process this timeline of trash.
In a year marked by such critical division and perceived failure, where high-budget studio films and ideologically driven projects routinely fell flat, does high acclaim, like an Oscar nomination, indicate a movie is just misunderstood art that speaks to a...
Or is it, as the source suggests, simply Hollywood rewarding the most politically progressive on-nose movie ever concocted, regardless of its fundamental failure as a piece of coherent cinema?
And this requires critical thought about the intersection of art and agenda in modern cinema, and whether the two can truly be separated.
That intersection of art and agenda provides the final thought for our deep dive into the 2025 timeline of trash. Hopefully you now have a thorough and detailed understanding of exactly why this year was considered such an abysmal showing based on this highly critical collection of sources.